I stood near the back of the conference room, holding a plastic cup of warm champagne while everyone clapped for my trainee, Phoebe. My boss, Jorge, threw an arm around her shoulder, grinning like a proud father. The whole floor had gathered to celebrate her big moment. I should have felt proud. After all, I had spent 2 years teaching her everything she knew. Then Jorge looked right at me. His smile twisted into something sharper. "Your trainee's promotion party would be perfect," he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "So, when's your turn?" Everyone laughed. The sound bounced off the walls and landed square in my chest. I felt my face burn as I forced a smile, my cheeks trembling from the effort. In that moment, I realized something I had been avoiding for years. They did not see me as the mentor who built this team. They saw me as the joke. I laughed along, because that was what I always did. But inside, something sharp and cold settled in my chest. It wrapped around my heart and squeezed. I knew, standing there in that room, that something inside me had just broken. And it was not going to stay broken quietly. I rushed to the bathroom the moment I could slip away. I locked myself in a stall and sat on the closed toilet lid with my hands shaking. My phone screen blurred as I scrolled through old emails and calendar invites. My name appeared on every major project briefing, but someone else always got the credit at the end. The bathroom door swung open. 2 coworkers walked in, laughing about something. I held my breath and listened. "Can you believe Phoebe leapfrogged her?" one of them said. "I give it another year before she dies in that senior specialist chair." They laughed again, washed their hands, and left. I bit my fist to stop the sob clawing up my throat. My brain flipped back and forth between rage and humiliation. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I should just be grateful I still had a job. And then one thought sliced through all the noise. Or maybe I was being played. For the first time in my career, instead of crying it out and moving on, I decided I was going to watch what happened next. I was going to watch carefully. And I was going to remember everything. I thought back to my last performance review. I had sat across from Jorge in his glass office, the city lights glowing behind him like a fake backdrop. He told me I was solid, reliable, someone he could always count on. Those words had felt like compliments at the time. But then he said I lacked executive presence. He said I needed to lean in more if I wanted a promotion. I had shown him a list of projects I led, metrics I improved, and clients I helped save. He barely glanced at the paper. He smiled and said, "That's all good, but it's not just about the work. You have to be seen as promotable." Now, in retrospect, I realized what he really meant. He was using my work to make himself look promotable. My being reliable meant he could steal my wins and know I would never push back. I was safe. I was quiet. I was useful. That realization stung so badly I felt physically sick. But it also lit a match inside me. A small flame flickered to life in my chest. And once that match was struck, I could not unstrike it. I thought about how I had coached Phoebe from day one. I walked her through messy systems. I cleaned up client decks at midnight. I covered her mistakes without ever mentioning them in meetings. I told myself I was investing in the future of the team, and stupidly, I thought that future included me. I remembered one night in particular. We stayed late to finish a presentation that Jorge later delivered as his own strategic vision. Phoebe had glanced at me across the table, uneasy, but she stayed quiet. I told myself it did not matter who got the credit as long as the work shined. Now I saw how that story ended. She got the promotion off the work I built. He got the glory. And I got a plastic cup of warm champagne and a public joke at my expense. I realized something else too. If they were willing to step on me to climb, they would do it again. They would do it without blinking. They would do it without guilt. And the worst part was, I had let them. Back at my desk after the party, my phone buzzed with a notification from the work group chat. Someone had dropped a meme about training your replacement. A laughing emoji followed. Another coworker sent a message that read, "Mentor of the Year Award goes to," followed by my name and a clapping gif. They thought it was banter. To them, it was harmless office humor. To me, it was proof. They all saw me as the person who did the work so everyone else could look good. I was the silent engine, the invisible backbone, the punchline. I did not type anything back. I just watched the messages roll in, one after another. A quiet numbness settled in my chest, followed by a clarity I had not felt in years. If they had all decided I was the punchline, then they had no idea what happened when the punchline finally got tired of the joke. I locked my phone and stared at the ceiling. My mind was already turning, already planning. I did not know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for certain. Things were about to change. A few days later, Jorge called me into a one-on-one meeting. He said he wanted to check in after the promotion news. He leaned back in his chair, his tones soft, pretending to care. "I know it must sting seeing someone you trained move up," he said, "but this just shows how strong of a leader you are." I asked him point blank why I was not considered for the role. He dodged. He talked about org structure, timing, and fit. When I pressed harder, his voice shifted. The warmth disappeared. "You're great where you are," he said. "Every team needs a rock. Phoebe's just better suited for a more visible role." There was that word again. Visible. My work was visible. It just was not attached to my name. I nodded like I had accepted it. But inside, I was cataloging every vague sentence, every non-answer, every subtle twist of blame onto me for not presenting myself better. This time, I was not leaving that office defeated. I was leaving with information, and I was already planning my next move. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. A cold cup of coffee sat untouched beside me. I created a new folder on my personal drive and named it with one word: proof. I started downloading everything: email threads where I built strategies, decks I wrote that Jorge presented as his own, screenshots of messages thanking me for work that someone else later claimed. I archived everything with dates and timestamps. I scrolled back through years of receipts I had ignored. I had minimized my own contributions just to keep the peace. I had convinced myself that being a team player meant staying silent when others took credit. My storyatch twisted as I realized how long this had been happening. The folder filled up fast. As I saved the last file, my anger sharpened into something more focused. It was no longer just hurt feelings. It was strategy. I realized I was not gathering this just to complain. I was gathering it because I was almost ready to do something I had never done before. I was ready to leave. And I was going to leave on my terms. A week later, a recruiter messaged me on LinkedIn. She said she had seen my work on a campaign our company ran. She asked if I would be open to a conversation. I started typing my usual polite decline. I was not really looking right now. But then I stopped. If my career was going to be used as a ladder for everyone else, why was I still clinging to the bot Jorge rung? I agreed to a call. On the video chat, she mentioned specific results from projects I had led. Results I had never publicly claimed. She knew my work better than my own boss did. "You're exactly the kind of person our clients look for," she said. For the first time, I heard an outsider describe my value without filtering it through Jorge's not-quite-leadership lens. It felt strange, almost dizzying. When she asked if I would be open to being put forward for a senior role at a rival firm, my heart hammered. But my answer came quickly and clearly. "Yes," I said. "Absolutely yes." Now that there was a real possibility of leaving, I started quietly pulling back at work. I stopped volunteering to fix things on nights and weekends. I stopped solving problems before they became visible. Instead, I let tasks sit until they landed where they were supposed to, on the people who were paid and promoted to own them. I began documenting handoffs to Jorge and Phoebe in writing. I sent emails that said things like, "Per our conversation, transferring ownership of this process to you." I copied them both every time. Every time they replied, "Sure, no problem," I saved it. Work started to feel less like a prison and more like a stage. I watched the other actors slowly forget their lines without my help. I watched them stumble through scenes they had never rehearsed. I could feel the balance of power shifting, even if no one else saw it yet. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. 2 weeks later, a report that used to appear on Monday mornings did not show up. That report had been my silent labor for years. Late nights, messy spreadsheets, quiet fixes. Now that it was officially under Phoebe and Jorge's ownership, I did not touch it. By noon, the client was emailing furiously, asking where it was. I watched Phoebe panic in the team channel. She asked how to pull certain numbers. Jorge responded with irritation, not guidance. "You should know this by now," he wrote. I sat at my desk, sipping my coffee, feeling a small, guilty thrill. The consequences of my invisibility were finally becoming visible. The client escalated to higher leadership. Suddenly, people who never noticed me were asking questions about processes they had taken for granted. I did not offer to help. I did not swoop in to save the day. I just watched. And I knew this was only the beginning. Senior leadership scheduled a process review meeting with Jorge and Phoebe. They wanted to understand why client deliverables were slipping. For the first time in years, I was not on the invite list. I watched them file into the glass conference room without me. From my desk, I could see Jorge gesturing, his face tight. He was clearly blaming bandwidth and growing pains. Phoebe looked like she might cry. I could almost hear the narrative they were spinning. Everything was fine before, it just got complicated. They were rewriting the story again. But this time, they were trying to rewrite it without the main ghostwriter. I watched the executives frown through the glass. Their arms were crossed. Their faces were skeptical. A thought hit me as I sat there pretending to work. They actually did not know how much I used to hold together. They had no idea who had been keeping this machine running. But they were about to find out. Later that day, HR called me in. I braced myself for the usual routine. Vague feedback. A reminder to be a team player. Maybe some passive suggestion that I needed an attitude adjustment. Instead, the HR rep looked at me seriously and asked, "Can you walk us through your historical role in the big client accounts?" I kept my face neutral and my voice steady. I explained what I'd been responsible for, what I had created, what I had owned, and when it was transferred. I did not embellish, I did not dramatize, I just told the truth. They asked why this was not reflected in my title or compensation. I shrugged. "I was told I wasn't quite leadership material," I said. The HR rep wrote something down. She did not respond right away. When I left the room, their silence followed me down the hall. It echoed louder than any accusation I could have made. For the first time, I knew that they knew. The recruiter emailed me again. The rival firm wanted a second interview. It turned into a final interview faster than I expected. They had done their homework. They knew my work. They were offering a senior role, a team of my own, and a salary that made my current paycheck look a bad joke. On the call, the hiring manager said one line that hit me hard. "We don't need you to prove yourself from scratch. Your track record speaks for itself." After years of being told I was almost there, hearing that felt like oxygen after drowning. It felt like someone had finally opened a window in a room I had been suffocating in for years. I told them I needed a few days to decide. But deep down, I already knew. I was not staying where I was treated like a replaceable assistant to my own ideas. My future was somewhere else, and it was waiting for me to claim it. That night, I drafted my resignation email. It was simple, polite, and professional. No emotional paragraphs, no detailed list of wrongs, just a clean, firm exit. My finger hovered over the send button, but I did not press it yet. Something did not feel finished. It was not revenge I was craving. It was justice. And justice was not about watching someone suffer. It was about the truth finally being seen. Right now, the truth was still buried. It was hidden under years of team effort and shared success. No one outside that company knew who had really done the work. I saved the email in my drafts and closed my laptop. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. If I was going to leave, I wanted to leave in a way that made it impossible for them to pretend I was never the backbone. I wanted them to remember my name, and I wanted the world to know it too. A week later, our biggest client sent a blunt email to leadership. They were concerned about inconsistency since the internal restructuring. They wanted to understand who actually built and managed their campaigns over the last few years. My name was mentioned directly in their message. Twice. They asked if I was still involved. I could almost feel Jorge's temper boiling from across the office. He marched to my desk, a tight smile plastered on his face. "Can you join the client call Thursday?" he asked. His voice was strained. This was the man who told me I was not fit for a more visible role. Now he needed me visible. He needed me desperately. I looked at him calmly and said, "I'll check my schedule." His smile faltered for just a second. I saw something flicker in his eyes. Panic, maybe, or the first hint of fear. He nodded and walked away, and I sat there, savoring the moment. Jorge called me into a huddle room and closed the door behind us. The charm was gone. What remained was fear and irritation, barely hidden beneath a thin layer of professionalism. "Look," he said, "we both know you've been a big part of this account. I need you to show up strong on this call. This is about the company, not your feelings." I felt a flash of old loyalty. Then I remembered every performance review where I was treated like a side character in my own story. I asked him directly, "Are you finally willing to acknowledge my role?" He dodged again. "This isn't the time for that," he said. That sentence, after everything, was the final nail in the coffin. He still could not admit the truth, even when his back was against the wall. I walked out of the room knowing exactly what I was going to do. By the time that call happened, I would not be sitting where he expected me to be. I sent an email to the executives in HR. I copied Jorge. The subject line was simple: client call preparation. The body read, "Happy to join Thursday's client call. For transparency, please find attached a brief outline of my historical responsibilities on the account to ensure clarity during the discussion." The document I attached was factual, dated, and backed up by emails they could verify. No drama, no accusations, just evidence. I watched the red receipts come in one by one. Jorge read it, the VP read it, HR read it, no one responded. But they did not cancel the call either. I realized they were going to walk into that meeting with more information than they had ever had about who actually held this account together. And they would be doing it just as my life was about to shift in a way no one expected. 2 days before the client call, the rival firm sent me an official offer letter. The start date made my Georgich flip, the Monday after the call. They also mentioned something that made my jaw drop. They had been in talks with that same major client. The client had suggested my name as a key reason they would consider switching vendors. I realized something I had not fully understood until that moment. The client was not attached to my company. They were attached to me. My work, my reliability, my late nights and early mornings. I signed the offer. The moment it was countersigned, I sent my resignation to HR and the executives, not to Jorge. My last day would be the day before the client call. I did not volunteer to cancel my appearance on that call, and no one asked if I still planned to attend. HR scheduled an exit interview. I walked in expecting the usual script. Instead, the HR rep looked more serious than I had ever seen her. She asked why I was leaving. I told her the truth. Not in a rant, but in a calm chronological story. The promotions that passed me by, the credit that was taken, the gaslighting that made me doubt myself. I did not accuse anyone of anything illegal. I stuck to verifiable facts. Who sent which emails, who presented which decks, who received which feedback. I directed them to my documentation. She took notes, a lot of them. When I finished, she let out a long breath. "I wish you'd come to us sooner," she said. I smiled, tired. I thought being good at my job would eventually be enough. As I left the room, I could feel the story I had lived in for years finally starting to crack. The day of the client call arrived. I walked into the building one last time. Not as an employee, as a guest. I had already turned in my laptop and badge. I was wearing a different access pass now. A visitor badge with my new company's logo printed on the lanyard. When I stepped into the boardroom, the executives went tense for a second. Then they quickly masked their surprise. The client was on the big screen, greeting me warmly. "We're glad you're here," they said. Jorge looked like someone had just pulled the rug out from under his chair. His face went pale. You don't work here anymore," he stammered. I sat down anyway. "No," I said calmly, "but I do still know this account better than anyone in this room." The client led with the question leadership had been avoiding. "We want to understand who actually built the strategy we've relied on for the last 4 years." There was no way to soften it. Either someone lied in front of everyone, or the truth finally stepped into the light. I outlined the history of the account, the timelines, the pivots, the crises averted, the late-night saves. Every point was something they could verify in their own inboxes. I did not attack Jorge directly. I did not have to. The gaps spoke for themselves. Jorge tried to jump in with vague phrases like team effort and shared success, but the client cut him off. "We asked who led it," they said. "We've always assumed it was her. Were we wrong?" No one answered right away. That silence was louder than any accusation I could have made. I sat there, hands folded, heart pounding, finally seen. After the call, the client requested a separate meeting, this time with me and my new firm. They were blunt. We've watched the quality dip since the internal changes. We trust you, not them. My new company offered them a transition plan. The client accepted without hesitation. We followed the person doing the work, they said, not the titles. Back at my old office, the fallout hit fast. I heard through the grapevine that the executives were furious about losing their biggest account. They were even more furious when they realized the warnings had been in their inboxes the whole time. The narrative they had built for years, that I was solid but not leadership, suddenly looked absurd on paper. Everyone could see it now. The evidence was everywhere, and there was no one left to blame but themselves. Weeks later, a former coworker called me. She whispered like we were kids sharing gossip at a sleepover. She told me there had been an internal review focused on how key talent was handled. Emails were examined, promotions were questioned. Georges' pattern of using other people's work as his own finally came into focus. Not just with me, but across multiple teams. He was called into meeting after meeting, each one more serious than the last. Eventually, he was asked to resign for misalignment with company values. Everyone knew what that really meant. I saw a photo online of someone else sitting in his old office. The nameplate was gone. For the first time, I did not feel numb or vindictive. I just felt done. The chapter was closed, and I had already moved on to something better. In my new office, I led a small team that actually listened when I spoke. When we finished a big project, my name was on the email to the client, not buried 3 lines down, front and center. My manager thanked me publicly, not just in private. I got invited to strategy meetings as a decision maker, not as the note taker. One afternoon, I got an email from Phoebe. Her message was long, apologetic, and raw. She admitted she knew, on some level, that my work was being used to prop up her promotion. She said she felt guilty. She said she should have spoken up. I read it twice. My chest felt tight. A younger version of me would have written back and tried to make her feel better. I would have said it was okay, that I understood, that there were no hard feelings. Instead, I closed the email and let it sit in my inbox, unanswered. Months later, I grabbed coffee with my new boss before a client meeting. She laughed and said, "You know, when we first spoke to that big client, they told us they'd only move if you were involved. That doesn't happen often." On the cab ride back, my phone lit up with a message from a former coworker. It was a photo of the office where I used to work. The caption read, "New leadership. Whole place feels different now. They're saying your name a lot lately." I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I tucked my phone away. I did not need to go back. I did not need an apology or a plaque or a rewritten org chart. My revenge was not watching them scramble without me. It was sitting here, in a life where my work finally matched my title. Knowing I walked out of the role that was slowly shrinking me and built something bigger. When I thought back to that promotion party and that stupid joke, I smiled to myself. My turn did not come at that company. My turn started the day I stopped waiting for them to give it to me.